And now, Deep Thoughts by Brad and Gary.
Hello and welcome to the Not Ready for Primetime Project. We're Gary Seath and Brad Robinson.
You're not.
This week on Deep Thoughts, we're talking about Fridays, Brad.
Yes. This is something we've been wanting to do for many seasons, but we really wanted to do it during season 5. Our original goal was to put it out amongst the SNL episodes when it originally aired. We couldn't do it. We've been wanting to bring back our good friend Dennis Perrin, who for many, many times has told us, anytime you want to do Fridays, call me. And I've been emailing Dennis for months saying, we're getting to it. And we're finally here. And we've got Dennis. How are you, buddy?
I'm very good. Up here in Vermont, and it snowed today. And
Oof.
Oh,
yeah, well, it's Vermont, man. It snows in the spring.
Before we get into the show itself, Dennis, how did you become such a fan of Fridays?
Well, I mean, I saw it from the very first episode live in 1980, April 11th, 1980. I was in the Army, and I used to hang out at this house near my base. A family friend of mine had this huge house, and I didn't have a TV in my barracks room, and there was no way I was going to go down to the rec area and say, hey, let's turn on this new live TV show. I mean, just, especially with these guys, so I'm just, I just said, hey, can I come over and watch this new show? Because it had been advertised and there was a big article in Rolling Stone. And I thought, oh, an LA SNL. I'm there. I'll watch it. I don't know if it's going to be any good, but what the hell? So anyway, I saw it on a portable color TV set in a kitchen in Central Indiana. So at least I had it in color. It was like one of these little portable TVs with an antenna. It was pre-cable.
Yeah.
So, but I got it because it was network. So yeah. And ever since then, I just began watching it. I was perplexed at first, and I thought, well, they're really slavishly, adhering to the SNL formula.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but I was intrigued by their humor, because it was the first episode was very absurdist, And the one cast member I had doubts about was Larry David. I don't know why. Ironically enough, right? I mean,
Right.
I mean, he had this big afro
Mm-hmm.
and thick glasses, and he just seemed to be like just a smart ass. I just was like, whereas like Michael Richards, Melanie Chartoff, Brandis Kemp, Mark Blankfield, they're sketch performers. I can see that. I don't know who this guy is. Oh, well, joke was on me, but yeah. He was he was ahead of his time, to be honest with you. He really was.
That's more
in many ways.
Yeah.
He never really changed his comic persona at all.
No,
really, since Fridays, it was pretty much already there.
Yeah.
So anyway,
so let's talk about how the show came to be and how it all started. Who was responsible for it? What was the deal? What was the deal behind?
Eventually,
Fridays?
somebody was going to copy SNL. You knew it was going to happen.
well, Lauren thought that within a year there'd be an imitator on either CBS or ABC. Once SNL became a hit, he thought, well, TV is imitative, so somebody's going to do this, because all they're doing is like rerunning old TV, like old Mannixes or whatever. But there's a lot of cost involved, staging a live network television show. So I think they probably thought the CBS and ABC, I thought the costs were prohibitive. So years, nothing happened. You had SCTV and syndication before it went to network. So, there were other things here and there, but no network live comedy show until 1979, when ABC met with John Moffat and Bill Lee, and they're a production team who were working with Dick Clark.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, John Moffat was Lauren's first pick to be the director of SNL, which he turned down.
Because he directed the Lily special with everybody, right? That's how
That's right. Him. No, he knew. Yeah, he knew Lauren, and Lauren thought, well, this is who I want. I want John Moffat, which is actually a wise choice. But Moffat had a really sweet deal with Dick Clark Productions, and he didn't know if this show was going to go or not. Who knew? And then, of course, once it became this huge hit, then John's like going, maybe I made a mistake. I could have been part of this. But then if he had taken the job, no Fridays, at least no Fridays with John Moffat.
Right.
Yeah. So ABC ordered it. and said, whatever you want to do, we want to look like Saturday Night Live. We want a cold open. We want a weekend update segment, And at first they didn't have hosts, and that was Moffat. That was Moffat's decision, because he said, I want the audience to get to know the cast first. We'll eventually bring in hosts, but not now. And so that's what happened. It wasn't until I think the second season that the first host, which was George Carlin, of course.
And John and Bill were brought in from Bernie Brillstein, right? Didn't ABC go to Bernie at first and wanted to put on a show? And he said, I got these guys. These guys can do it for you.
Right. And again, I think ABC knew the history of Moffat and Lee, that, they were probably the perfect choice. They were out there. And this time, I don't know if they were still under contract with Dick Clark. Clearly not, because if they were, they quit or got out of their contract and then went to develop Fridays.
I think ABC had them on a development deal and were waiting to do something. Yeah, I was reading up on John Moffat, and I think him and Bill Lee were on a deal at some point. And then, again, Bernie represented them, and he was like, well, here, I'll take over late night. I love Bernie Brillstein's stories.
Well, yeah, man. And he was shameless. He was Falstaffian, as they used to say.
He also repped Burns. He repped Jack Burns, who they brought in.
That's true.
Was he the head writer?
Was he
considered the head writer? Okay.
At the beginning, and the announcer.
Right. Knew the answer.
Before they turned it over to John Rourke. But
okay.
They used Jack Burns as a jumping off point because they felt the audience would recognize him because he was a known quantity. And I'll be honest with you, when I first saw it, I thought, and I was such a comedy snob when I was younger, I was like going, Jack Burns, that hack from Mayberry, and and Avery Shriver on Ed Sullivan, where they're going, you know what I mean? Huh? Yeah. I know what you mean, that bit. And they did it a million times. It was the taxi cab sketch they would always do on like Ed Sullivan or Flip Wilson. They would do the same bit over and over again. So when I first saw Jack Burns on camera, I thought, oh man, I'm like, oh God, we're in for a rough ride. But you know what? I was wrong. And he was the head writer at the beginning. Yes.
Yeah. And I was, like, how does that come to be? Because as you mentioned, or I'm sure we'll talk about it too, just the kind of humor that they were doing, it's a cliche word, I feel like, but it was so very like punk that Jack Burns is like not the guy you think is spearheading this.
Well, I mean, Jack Burns had a real alternative sensibility.
Okay.
And also he very eclectic. I mean, he wrote for Hee Haw. He was the head writer of Hee Haw, as a matter of fact, and The Muppet Show. And he worked on that in the first season. He was the head writer of The Muppet Show. So he had a very eclectic background. And also, he came out of Second City, and he had worked with George Carlin and a comedy team in the late 50s, early 60s. In fact, there's an album of the two of them from the Playboy Club, I think from 1960. So he had his bona fides, I mean, he was all over the place in show business. But I remember Tom Kramer, who was a writer and sort of their Tom Schiller, making short films. And I got to know Tom a little bit. I was out in LA, and I think I wrote about it, ages ago. But Tom said,
you did. I just found it. I looked it up last week.
Okay, good. You're doing your homework, Brad. I'm glad to hear it. But told me that Jack Burns really wanted this show. He was going to ride this to shore. This was going to be like the culmination of everything he did up to that point, which is why he was up front and center. But the reason he was up front and center is because Moffat, said, well, we need somebody recognizable so the audience will hook into it. And you're recognizable. People know who you are. So that's why he's so front and center. He's the announcer. He did the intro to the music guests, all that stuff. And then eventually Jack Burns himself said he took himself out of the equation. He goes, okay, the show's on its feet. I don't need to be on camera anymore. And then they turned the announcing over to John Rourke. For those listening, we haven't gotten to the cast yet, but John Rourke was one of the cast members.
Well, let's talk about the cast then.
Yeah, an interesting group, right? Not the most, well, I guess are they the most seasoned sketch cast at this point when they come in? Like, SNL obviously was very,
not really.
They were very groundlings or very Second City. Lemmings,
well, there were a couple
National
of people. I mean, Meredith Burrell was from the Groundlings.
Right.
but not, it wasn't like the SNL people at the beginning because they all had worked together.
Right.
National Lampoon Radio Hour, Lemmings, Second City. They all knew each other, and they knew each other's rhythms and moves and everything. Fridays, with the exception of Brandis Kemp and Mark Blankfield, who were married and were in a comedy group called Low Moan Spectacular, I believe it was called. And they didn't do really sketch comedy. They did like shows. They did like productions a la Second City.
Oh, okay.
And that's where they came from. But in fact,
Larry David and Michael Richards were stand-ups, right? Weren't they doing?
No, yeah. Michael Richards was
stand-ups.
Michael Richards was in a comedy team with Ed Begley Jr., I believe, before Friday.
Oh my God.
That's true. They were a comedy team. Yeah. Try finding that one. I don't know if there's any video evidence of that, but you'll just have to take my word for it. And Larry David was a stand-up.
Right.
He was a regular at the Improv in New York, and that's where they saw him. He moved to LA. I don't think he really performed in LA. He was a New York comic. And Larry David, I don't think was totally on board. He didn't quite, but he took it. It's a job, right? So of course he took it. But typical Larry David, he was just like, well, I don't know if this is going to fly. I don't know, but whatever. And the rest is history. But yeah, they were all over the place. Melanie Chardoff had done sitcoms, guest starring. She didn't have her own sitcom, but who else? Bruce Mahler appeared on Fernwood Tonight a few times. He played the piano upside down. I think he did one with the parakeet, which they brought onto Fridays. It was his parakeet. I think there's a opening where he's playing the violin. Bruce Mahler was a virtuoso, by the way, musically. Brilliant guy.
Oh.
And he would he'd play the violin and the parakeet would like dance on the bow. He'd go, yeah. I'm doing this visually for the people listening, but you just have to imagine it.
We're going to animate this whole interview, so it's okay.
Good.
You'll see it. Yeah.
Good. Make it cyber, baby. Let's go. So anyway, it was a disparate cast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they had to gel on the air. And it showed early because I think there were pockets of, bad timing and just, they weren't a gelled unit when the show went on. I mean, I'm sure they went through months of rehearsals and meetings but once you actually, once the red light goes on,
right,
all bets are off. So, but all of them were seasoned. I mean, they all had training.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, pulling them together. And I think within a year, they did gel.
Yeah.
They did come together.
The only thing I'd say before we get into the show itself, as we continue behind the scenes, is we should a little bit about the writers, and the writers that they bring in to do the show. We mentioned Jack Burns is the head writer. Larry David's writing a bit, but just who are some of the other writers people might not realize that, we're on this show?
Well, Larry Charles, as I'm sure our listeners know, was a director of Borat and worked with Sacha Baron Cohen on many projects. And is a brilliant guy. I've talked to him a couple of times. Super intelligent, funny, neurotic, but funny. Who else? Bruce Kirschbaum, who I briefly talked to once. When you want to talk about, I won't go into neuroses. I mean, these are comedy writers we're talking about coming out of the 70s. So neuroses. Elaine Pope, who later went on to work with Larry David. She ended up writing for Seinfeld.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were a bunch of people as writers. I'm trying to scroll in my head all of them, but I think those are the outstanding, the ones that went on to do other things.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting mix. That's all I can say.
We've talked to two of the writers from the show. We've talked to Kevin Kelton and Matt Newman.
And Matt Newman, yeah.
Yeah. That's right. I forgot Matt Newman wrote for them because I remember him from SNL, obviously.
Right.
Yeah, he came. I remember he said he came late. He needed a job, and he knew John Moffat, because Matt wrote on the Lily special, and then Moffat offered him the job, and then Kevin started on Fridays and then went to SNL.
Went to SNL under Ebersol, right?
Yeah. So, and I know we'll talk about this too. One of the things with Friday and its legacy or lack thereof is that it's hard to find, or it's been hard to find for so long. So for people who might not know the show very well, let's do how it's similar and how it's different. I feel like, what are the similarities you touched on a little bit that they took from SNL? You know, they have Friday Edition, right, which is like their weekend update. Musical acts are on there. It's live, like you mentioned, live in LA. Obviously, a sketch show. Is there anything else that kind of like was like the ripoff of SNL that they copied?
That's pretty much it. I mean, the
Yeah.
whole framework is SNL.
Yeah.
And again, Lauren knew at some point in time someone was going to do it. It was just SNL was too successful not to imitate. What was it? Fred, the late great Fred Allen, one of my favorite humorists of all time. In the 50s, he says, imitation is the sincerest form of television. And I think that's true. And certainly Fridays proves that.
Would you
So
say its biggest difference then? I know we've talked about this. This is why I feel like you like it so much. Is the biggest difference is the comedy, what they're satiring and what they're making fun of, and like just the tone of their humor is probably the biggest difference.
well, they were much more adventurous. And once they got their footing, they began to expand and they began doing these large, like 15, 17-minute pieces that would music, like musicals, and they wouldn't break for commercial. I mean, it would just be this like almost 20 minutes of pure live television, live comedy with music. And I mean, the most prominent, of course, was their parody of the Rocky Horror Picture Show with Ronald Reagan as Dr. Frankenfurter. And yeah, and Larry Charles and I think Bruce Kirschbaum wrote those.
Mm.
So yeah, that would be the big difference. Because especially at the time, I mean, yeah, Fridays was much more expansive than Ebersol's SNL. Certainly Domanian's SNL, which only lasted 12 episodes, but still, she was so Jean Domanian, and I'm not going to badmouth her because I don't know her, and she was given an impossible task. But she tried to copy the Lorne model too much. She didn't go outside of it. And then Ebersol came in and he did pretty much the same thing, although he allowed things to loosen up here, loosen up there. But for the most part, he had the same framework. Fridays began with that framework, but then once they felt confident enough, they expanded and they started doing wilder stuff. I think the humor was much more adventurous and more conceptual. And again, they were much more political. Their sketches, they did sketches set in El Salvador, and which at the time was a huge deal. And SNL really didn't touch on any of these things. I mean, occasionally, but not really. I mean, Fridays did musicals about El Salvador. I mean, they were in your face with it. So that's what I remember most of all. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is great, and I was emulating it in my own stage show, a lot of it. I mean, Fridays meant that much to me. I wanted to write for it. I thought I was perfect for it. I was at the right age. I was 22. I understood their humor, but yeah. So I ended up moving to LA in 85, but that's a whole different thing. And I did end up writing for some TV, but that's a whole different trip.
And Fridays leaned into drugs a lot more than SNL, especially SNL in the 80s, right? There's a lot of drug humor in Fridays.
Oh, yeah. You got characters smoking pot, I mean.
Ganja Chef or Rasta Chef, I think it is.
Rasta Gourmet.
Right.
Daryl Igus. Yeah. Which got more like, woo, than laughs, like, oh, he's smoking a joint.
Well, it's funny, watching these old episodes, anytime there's a reference to drugs, the crowd just yells. In any episode, it's not just like one particular episode. Anytime they mention drugs or anything like that, you just hear everybody hooting and hollering in the audience.
I know. Well, that was the period. I mean, you didn't really see a lot of drug humor on TV. You really didn't. I mean, primetime wouldn't allow it. I mean, you didn't see characters on Dallas or whatever smoking weed. I mean, so, and when Ebersol took over, he limited the drug references. I don't think he liked it. And I think the network also was behind him on that. It was just like, no, we want to really tamp down on this, because the original show obviously talked about drugs all the time, and for good reason. So I think especially after Belushi's death, I think they wanted to like, no, let's not do the drug stuff. Not as much. Fridays, you're right, Brad. Fridays Yeah, they did drug humor all the time in a variety of situations. Absolutely.
Other thing I just found recently, I was reading, I think it was Don Novello was talking about when he hosted, but they didn't like SNL would create many more sketches a week that wouldn't go on the air. Or I guess Fridays
Right.
didn't do that. Like they basically what they wrote, they said maybe like one sketch a week might not make it, but they weren't making because
Right.
of I guess it was budget, what they said. You know, they didn't have the money that SNL did to create all these sets and build all these costumes to just throw them away. So
Hmm.
they were really
That's
confined to
true.
like what they wrote is what went on the air.
And you also have to remember at the beginning, Fridays was only an hour long. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't expand to 90 minutes until later. So it was a tight show. And you're right. I mean, pretty much what they wrote went on,
Mm.
whether it was ready or not, whether it was
Yeah.
funny or not. They had to. I mean, that was it. That's all they had. So they had to go with it, which is why in the early period, it's uneven. The
Mm-hmm.
humor is very uneven. And sometimes it hits, a lot of times it doesn't. But I'll give the cast credit, man. They tried selling it, they didn't give up on it, you know. And sometimes you would see a sketch and you'd hear the audience go, oh, like they groan. Like, it didn't happen a lot, but it did happen because they would use a punchline that was really kind of hacky. And, you know, again, if they had more time or whatever, maybe they would have ironed that out. But again, I think that was good training for them because most of them had never done this before. So they were just trying to see what hit and what didn't. So yeah, yeah, the
Speaking of
right.
cast, didn't you? I feel like I remember you wrote something about at one point Dick Ebersol came and tried to poach when he took over for Gene. He tried to poach the Fridays staff, the writers and or crew, and nobody wanted to leave.
Yeah, he offered the entire Fridays cast, which is much easier than recruiting your own cast. We'll just take Fridays and put them on SNL because they've already been doing this, so they know the process, and they're proven. And they all turned him down. And then he went after Melanie Chartoff individually, and she told me the one time I talked to her, she says, I said, were you ever tempted? I mean, it's SNL. And she goes, no, I wasn't tempted at all. I didn't want to go to New York and I didn't want to work on SNL. We had our own show and we were proud of it. And, but yeah, I mean, Ebersol was a poacher, the poaching producer. I mean, he just and eventually he got Larry David to write for him and Kevin Kelton
Right.
and who else? Rich Hall.
Oh, right.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, Rich Hall.
He came late in the Fridays run, and then he eventually became the co-anchor of the Friday edition with Melanie Chartoff. But he did a lot of pre-tapes too, and it was like Rich Hall on the road. The stuff he would later do for Letterman in the early days when he wrote he wrote for the morning show, Letterman's morning show. That actually came before. Did it? Yeah, 80, 19. So it's the same period.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I always liked Rich Hall. Again, he was, I think, the only new cast member that ever came on Fridays because of, they were only on for a couple seasons. So
Right.
they brought in Rich Hall and he began doing his own stuff, but he didn't really participate in sketches with the other cast members. He'd either appear on the Friday edition and do his little bits and his pre-tape stuff, or he would do live stuff, but it would just be him. He would doing household hints, things like that. So he didn't appear with the cast. He wasn't doing characters, anything like that. So yeah. And I have tremendous respect for him. I loved his stuff. I thought he was very original. Kind of remind me a little bit of Ernie Kovacs and his pre-tapes. So yeah, very original comic mind. I will say this. When Larry David came to write for SNL in 84, of course, he wasn't in the cast. And I had no idea because a lot of times the show would run long, so you wouldn't get the credits. And I always studied the writing credits, always. Because I want to see who's writing for this. So anyway, it was a Christmas episode or something like that. And it was a sketch with Billy Crystal, Martin Short, and Christopher Guest. They play these old Jewish guys in a deli. and they're all talking about, no, Eddie Murphy was the host. That's it. Because Eddie Murphy comes in as Gumby. So it's a Gumby sketch. And in the background, I remember watching this live, and I'm noticing these two guys at this table right behind them, but they're on camera. And one of them is Larry David. And I go, is that Larry David from Fridays? Because he looked just like he was on Fridays. I go, no, it can't be. No, because if he were on SNL, he'd be in the cast, right? I mean,
Right.
but it was.
Yeah.
It was Larry David. He became an extra on the show. He was an extra in a lot of stuff. It's weird though, isn't it? I mean, you had this guy who was a cast member on this rival show, and Ebersol brings him in and just keeps him in the writing room, which I thought was odd, but whatever. I mean, he proved himself on camera. So I
Maybe
don't know.
maybe Ebersol was pissed that he turned him down when he originally asked him to come over, and that was his FU.
Stay in the writer's room.
Yeah. Well, you know that story about Larry David quitting and then coming back, and which he recycled on Seinfeld. When George quits the job and he realizes how much money he's going to lose, so he comes back the next Monday, and he's sitting in the conference room with the rest of the staff, and they go like, "Is that George Costanza down there? I thought you quit." And apparently that's what Ebersol said about Larry David. He goes, "Is that Larry David? I thought you quit the show."
Yeah.
Quit?
Who did
No,
you talk to?
come on. What are you talking about? Of course not.
I think Kevin told us that story too. It was either Kevin or Gary Kroger. We talked to Gary. One of the two of them definitely told us that story. Because we asked, we said, "Were you there? Were you there when that happened?" They were like, "Oh yeah."
Yeah, it was a staff meeting, right? Yeah. And all the writers were there, and the cast was there. Yeah. And is that Larry David at the end of the table? Well, you got to admire the balls on the guy.
Yeah. I mean, oh my God.
He quits a job that most comedy writers dream of getting, and then he realizes, boy, that was a bad move.
There's another story Kroger's told where they're at, I think, the wrap party for the last episode of the season. And Larry goes up to Gary Kroger and tells him he's going to kill Dick Ebersol. He's going to kill Dick. And he has like a vial of some kind of liquid or something. And Gary's like, oh my God, he's going to do it. And then they recycled in Seinfeld, where I think George kills like one, or not kills, but
he slips the Mickey.
Slips the Mickey. Yeah. So it's like another Larry David SNL story to Seinfeld.
Well, Larry David is nothing if not economical. You know, he recycles his stuff on a regular basis, which a lot of great comics do. So,
were there any sketches for you, Dennis, that stood out and have like stayed with you as one of your favorites from Fridays?
Well, I mentioned one of them, the Rocky Horror sketch, which I thought was fabulous. It wasn't really funny. It just had bravado. It just like they just threw it out there. And it's live TV, and it's multiple sets. And, you know, I just thought, and Moffat obviously was, you know, overseeing it all. And you could tell, I mean, he guided them along this path, and it was beautiful. So definitely that. I like some of the off stuff that they did. I'm trying to remember some of them. I mean, like one-off things. I was a big fan of Bruce Mahler, who I think is really, I mean, I know he went on to Police Academy movies, and
that's another one. He used to do the rabbi sketches with Larry David.
That's right. And then he appeared on Seinfeld.
Like verbatim brought that character to Seinfeld as the rabbi.
Well, yeah, again, you know, Larry David was very loyal to his Fridays brethren.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He brought them on all the time. I mean, I forgot about Bruce Mahler, but yeah, that's true. Marion Burrell, Melanie Chardoff. I mean, they all appeared on Seinfeld. So yeah, he threw them all bones and just said, yeah. So yeah. It's interesting. Like I said before, of all the people at Original Fridays, I never thought Larry David would be like the one who came out like David O. Selznick or something. I mean, it was just ridiculous. Although in retrospect, I'm like, well, of course he did. He was the most original comedy mind of that show. Of course, Michael Richards went along with him. I know Michael Richards has had his problems, obviously. So he needed like a guiding hand to unleash. I always felt Kramer was a cousin to the character he played on Fridays called Dick, who was like this wannabe lounge lizard who was always hitting on women in bars and things like that. He always had a cigarette dangling out of his mouth. And if you go back, I mean, it's all over YouTube. You can find this easily. You see like a proto Kramer in this character. Only, Kramer wasn't quite as predatory. Kramer was much more clueless and absurd.
Mm-hmm.
This character is predatory, but it was Michael Richards, and so we had that kind of vibe. So I suppose there's that angle as well. I remember when I first saw Seinfeld, and the very first time I saw it, and I like going, "Oh, Michael Richards, he's from Fridays," and then I just thought, well, it's a gig, it's a job, he's an actor, And then I saw the credits. I go, Larry David. Well, wait a minute, why isn't he in the show? Which he was. I mean, as the voice of George Steinbrenner, but other than that, yeah. So Fridays, it went on, and it's a weird show in that sense because, SNL is still around. And so obviously we had all these alumni, going into different areas of show business or burning out altogether, just completely fading away. But the ones who kept going, it all ties back to their time in 8H, and in terms of other characters, I don't know. I mean, some of them just seem kind of hacky to me. I mean, I love Brandis Kemp. God bless her. Rest in peace. But she had this ongoing, another pre-tape thing where she was a psychic, no, palm reader. That was it. And she'd read your palm, and you just had like this POV of a palm, and she's reading it. And she's like predicting all these horrific things that's going to happen to you. And then she goes, wait a minute, I'm getting another vibe. Oh, no, you're gonna be perfectly fine. And you're gonna go on a picnic tomorrow, and it's gonna be really nice. And then she go, $25. And that was a recurring character, pre-tape character, but I always kind of like that. I mean, it kind of got on my nerves after a while. I'm like going, well, it's the same thing over and over again, but then it's television, it's late night TV. You if it rings, you keep ringing. I mean, that's all. So yeah, like I said, the cast, I mean, I like Mark Blankfield. I thought he was like Michael Richards in a way, but in a much more controlled way. Michael Richards seemed chaotic when he did physical comedy. Mark Blankfield was like almost surgical about it. And again, he died not long ago. I think just like 2-3 years ago, something like that. So rest in peace.
He's the one who did the Hunchback, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That is an amazing performance.
The gay Hunchback Mime.
Yeah, the gay Hunchback.
Ken was the character.
His body movement when he does that is just amazing.
Oh, I know. That's what I'm saying. He was a great physical comic.
Amazing.
And yeah, I'm telling you. And you talk about what I think Ann Beats used to call premise overload. I mean, gay Hunchback Mime is premise overload, but for some reason, Mark Blankfield pulled it off. So it worked. But yeah, if you read it on paper, it's like, okay, a gay Hunchback Mime. Okay, next, and that's like, premise over. Yeah, we're gonna do that. Mark Blankfield totally sold it. He was fantastic at it. And they did a variety of versions of it. And it's weird because as that character evolved, other people in the sketches, the characters in the sketches, accepted him. At the beginning, they were like kind of appalled by him. Like, who is this guy? But eventually he became like he worked as a chef, short order cook or something. And the owner of the place didn't even look twice, So yeah. Who else?
Well, if we talk sketches, we have to bring up, obviously, I'd say the most well-known Fridays sketch or bit of all time, which I'd love to hear, especially if you were watching it live, the whole Andy Kaufman fight bit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I did see that live. And again, I know most people thought it was real, but I was so into Andy Kaufman by that point that I didn't know for a fact, obviously, but I mean, I suspected, oh, this is fake. There's no way he would go off the rails like this. Now, the genius of the piece was that Michael Richards apparently didn't know. He later said he knew, but he didn't know. And Meredith Burrell didn't know. In fact, you watch that sketch, you see her like giggling nervously, like, what's going on? Now Melanie Chartoff knew because John Moffat told her ahead of time, look, Andy's going to break and we don't know where it's going to go, because he was afraid she'd freak out. which is why she's so calm in the sketch. Mary Edith didn't know. And apparently Michael Richards didn't know either. But again, he didn't want to be seen as a dupe, I think, later. And, and it became a big deal. So he said, oh, I was in on it. But I don't think he was. Although he had a very funny thing. He went off camera. He came back with the cue cards and just slapped them right in front of Andy Kaufman. So if he did know, he did a great job of pretending he didn't know. It's a great acting bit, but who knows? I know Melanie knew, definitely. But I wasn't sure. See, that's the thing with Andy. You really didn't know. I mean,
right.
But I was a huge Andy Kaufman fan, and he always went off script or did things you didn't expect. So I thought, well, maybe, but I kind of find this hard to believe. And then, Jack Burns comes in and threatens to fight him and, go to commercial, stuff like that. I'm like, okay. Okay. This is, I don't know. This is suspect. And it turned out later, obviously, it was all fake.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the next week, didn't John Moffat sit with Andy Kaufman?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like John Moffat said, it was all over the news. And the next week he sat there. He goes, I'm John Moffat, the producer of Fridays. Last week we did the sketch. People want to know if it was real. He goes, no, it wasn't real. It was fake. We set this bit.
And then Andy breaks again. Yeah,
he breaks again. He walks off set.
Yeah.
No, actually, no. Yeah, John Moffat walked off set. That's right, because Andy started like acting up.
He's like, I can't say this. This is wrong.
I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. Andy Kaufman. I know he got known through SNL and then of course Taxi, obviously. But I think Fridays fit his style of humor much more than SNL did. I mean, on SNL, he wasn't really part of the cast. I mean, he didn't really mix with them at all. He just came on and did his set bits, which were brilliant. But with Fridays, I always felt, and he was only on a couple of times, but I always felt that he blended more with that show. And I think they were much more open to his style of breaking and his style of humor, whereas SNL was much more rigid about it. It's like, well, you go here and you have like 3.5 minutes and do your thing. And I know Lauren loved Andy, but he kept him on a tight leash. John Moffat was like, hey, do what you want. I mean, as long as we don't get in trouble with the FCC,
right.
you can't blurt out, obscenities. But other than that, yeah, Andy was probably emblematic of the Friday style, definitely.
Were you still watching SNL at the time?
Yes. I never stopped watching SNL.
So then talk a bit, if you can, again, somebody who was doing it during real time, of the move from Fridays down here getting slammed by critics and panned by everybody, and SNL still having something where it shifted, and then SNL kind of falls, and Fridays was beating them in the ratings and became, all the people who hated Fridays all of a sudden loved Fridays.
Well, it's because of Gina Manian. When she took over, I mean, the show went to the toilet. I mean, it was one for the ages. I mean, it's incredible that someone could, and it wasn't just her fault completely. I mean, she took the blame because she was the producer, but yeah, it was because of the Damanian period. SNL started to come back up again the next year when Ebersol took over and Michael O'Donoghue became the head writer. I mean, he only lasted a few months before he was fired. Obviously, I think he was angling for it, so he can get paid for the second half of the season, not have to work. So, that was Michael. If I can get paid to sitting on my ass, that's fine. That works for me. But I think when he brought back O'Donoghue, I think it was an acknowledgement that Fridays was edgier. So who better to bring the edge back to SNL than Mr. Mike, right? And he did for a time. I mean, some of the sketches under his tutelage, the family that lives next to the nuclear power plant, I think that was the last sketch he wrote before he was fired. But Bill Murray, Eddie Murphy has the dynamite strapped to his head. At Home with the Psychos, that was the name of the sketch.
Yes.
But yeah, I think when Ebersol brought Michael in, and Michael thought he had the green light, so he just pushed and pushed and pushed, and would tell everybody, I should be running the show. Ebersol doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't have a comedy bone in his body. And of course, this all got back to Ebersol, and he was causing dissension in the ranks. And even people who championed him, like Mary Gross, started thinking, well, maybe I should not tie myself to this guy too closely, because I
Mhm.
don't think he's going to be around much longer. And she was right. As a matter of fact, Michael showed me a letter that Mary Gross wrote him after he was fired. And she apologized for not sticking up for him.
Oh, wow.
But it was like, hey, I need this job. Anyway, yeah, I think Ebersol was trying to compete with Fridays, which he did. And obviously, as we already discussed, he tried to get the entire cast to jump. So, or at
Right.
least most of them. So obviously he had his eye on it. Oh, there's also, they did a parody. Ebersol actually, when he was out there recruiting the cast, it's actually it was on the air and you can probably find it. Ebersol's in the studio audience during one of the Fridays broadcasts, and they knew about it. They knew he was there. They knew why he was there. And I can't remember exactly, but they did like the chroma key, not the chroma key, but the
Chiron on the
the
bottom?
Chiron. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And they were doing a parody of what SNL used to do. They focus on somebody in the audience.
Yeah.
Only this one was Dick Ebersol. And it's like, produces some other late night show, something like that. And he looked at the camera and you could see he was not pleased. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't laughing along. It's like, oh God, my cover's blown. It's like, well, everybody knows you're here. You're Dick Ebersol. How's it, you think you can slide in?
Mm-hmm.
So I think Moffat was like, let's turn the tables on old Ebersol.
Yeah.
Because I don't think he was pleased with what he wanted to do to his cast.
Right.
Sure. Makes sense. Then towards the end of the run, ABC decides to make a decision to put Fridays after Ted Koppel.
Right.
And give Ted Koppel 5 nights a week. So from your perspective, again,
granted, we do not appreciate the Iran hostage crisis, obviously, but how does this happen?
Yeah.
Well, Nightline is cheaper to produce. It's single camera for the most part. You're right. Nightline had huge ratings. Sometimes their ratings were bigger than Tonight Show. And Fridays was, they did well in the ratings, but I mean, they weren't Nightline, and they were a much more expensive show to produce. I think ABC fell out of love with Fridays, so they felt they could just put it anywhere, because they also did a primetime special.
Right. Yeah. For anybody who doesn't
82.
know, Koppel was doing 4 nights a week, right? He was doing 11:30 to midnight, Monday through Thursday, and the ratings were so high, they wanted to put him 5 nights a week.
Right.
And for some reason, I guess you don't want to put Fridays right up against Saturday Night Live, but they moved it to midnight after the Ted Koppel show. And so Nightline, so like no one stayed up to watch it, which is like.
Right. No, the ratings dropped.
Yeah.
Big time. Yeah. And why wouldn't they? I mean, most people aren't reading the trades, especially back then. So they don't know what they turn on 11:30 and there's Ted Koppel. Like, wait a minute, what day is it? And then they would say, they have commercials, stay tuned after Nightline, a new episode of Fridays. But by that point, it was really Saturdays, because midnight is Saturday. So technically it's not really Friday anymore. But yeah, I don't know if they ever really I don't know. Maybe you guys know better than I. If ABC ever seriously considered about putting it up directly against SNL. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
It would have been interesting.
Because you say they moved it, they tried to make it primetime, and then of all the shows to put it up against in primetime, it goes up against Dallas. It's like, what are you doing to this show?
The number one show on television. Yeah. I know, right? A lot of the writers would not go to the primetime thing. And I don't think Larry Charles wrote for it. Not as a protest, just out of like, this is ridiculous. This is not a primetime show. But other writers did, and they did an hour-long special, which, again, you can watch on YouTube. It's not very good.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of the last gasp. I mean, Larry Charles was appalled by it. He goes, this is just insulting. He goes, Fridays is not a primetime show. It's not. It's a late-night comedy show. And I don't know. It would have been interesting. I don't think ABC really had the guts or the wherewithal or whatever to match it directly against SNL.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been interesting. I still think SNL probably would have beaten them,
right?
Just because it had that turf already covered, and Fridays would be like an interloper coming in, although they already established an audience. But here's the thing: many of the Fridays audience, of which I was one, we watch Fridays on Friday night. We watch SNL on Saturday night. So we had 2 sketch shows, not back to back. Now you put them up against each other. I don't know, which one do I pick? I probably pick Fridays, actually, at least early on, just to see, especially back then. So yeah, it's and in retrospect, it's probably best that it only lasted as long as it did, because it did tear a little hole in late night television, but it didn't blow it wide open. If it had more time to develop, and they were just, like I said before, developing, their they were getting their feet, is what I want to say. If it was given another season or 2, who knows? I mean, we still might be having Fridays today.
Well, let's talk about the legacy then of Fridays, because we're, as we wrap this up and the show is now eventually canceled, what, and I think we just touched on it briefly, if they had gone up against Saturday Night Live, who knows? Maybe we would be doing, the 40th anniversary of Fridays. But what contributions do you feel it made to sketch comedy in the greater zeitgeist?
Well, as I think we touched on before, I think its influence was more in sitcoms and not late night comedy, because other late night shows, they pretty much followed the same format. And Living Color was that was a primetime one, but it was the same kind of format. The template was there. And I don't know how Fridays, to the degree that they did anything while they were on the air, they did, again, try to bust out of the SNL template as much as they could. Given the limitations of what they were doing. So I don't know. It would have been interesting to have 40 years of Fridays. I don't know how that would work, but at least you would have like new cast members. See, that was the thing about Fridays I think we missed. Bring in new cast members. Other ones go off, and it would have been interesting. Would they re-energize the show? Would they give it a different flavor? Everything we've come to expect of SNL. Cast turnovers and everything. So yeah, with the exception of Kenan Thompson, who I think if we were with Fridays, he'd still be with Fridays. So it wouldn't make any difference. And I love Kenan, but dude, come on.
It's also amazing that the show was just so hard to find for so long. Like that's part of it too. I feel like you have to search out Fridays. You have to find it. I know there's the best of DVDs now, and if you go some of those websites, we know where you can find some stuff. They've got long, full episodes, but it was like lost forever.
It was, but it's on YouTube. It's easy to go. Just go to YouTube, get on the search engine, and just and just say Fridays ABC or Fridays Late Night Comedy, whatever, and they have pretty much every show. I watched the first 2 episodes before we talked, just to refresh my memory of how it began.
Okay.
I knew it anyway, but
right.
they have entire shows with the musical guests. So yeah, it was very much of its time. Again, I don't know what legacy there is, I think the fact that we're talking about it just shows what comedy nerds we are, which I have no problem identifying as. But I'm glad it existed. I'm not quite sure how long its longevity. ABC clearly got tired of it early on and just like pushed it to the side, push it to midnight. Like,
yeah.
We don't really need this. We'll keep it around, but and it was clear that Moffat and the cast and the writers felt ABC was just like turning their back on them. Like they came in with such fanfare. And the weird thing is ABC lost interest just as the show was coming alive.
Right. That's what's so weird.
Yeah.
Like you took 2 years to claw and scrape yourself up.
Yeah. And
then you're like, okay, we're going to tap out.
Yeah. You actually tap into a larger audience. That's why I'm mildly surprised that they didn't attempt to put it up against SNL, like even for a month or something. But you're right. It would have been smarter just to wait till like the summer.
Well, and I was looking it up too. I think NBC at one point tried to counter program when one of the SCTV I think it was Network, the 90-minute SCTV show.
Yeah.
They put that up, I think, against them on Friday night. So like NBC tried to counter program.
Yeah. I mean, it came on a little later.
Oh, did it? Okay.
It came on at midnight. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, you're right. And, SCTV was genius. I mean, think about that cast.
I know. Well, thank you, Dennis. It was great as always. I'm sorry it took so long to get you in. It's always a blast talking to you.
Well, I love talking to you guys. I mean, you feed my nerd. It's great, and it gives me a chance to talk about the things I'm passionate about. And this is one area of life, especially comedy, that I am passionate about. And you can tell I go off in different directions. One thought leads to another thought, leads to a third thought. But I mean, it all ties together in my mind.
Yeah.
And I mean, comedy is my favorite art form. I mean, I've seen so much of it and participated in it and wrote for it and did all these things. And to this day, I'm still like enamored of it. I mean, I'm not really actively involved, but
what are you writing on your notepads?
A variety of things. I have a Substack, and I write some political essays and some cultural essays, comedy essays. It depends, whatever moves me. I'm essentially retired. I'm living comfortably in Vermont. I don't need to work a day job. And that's thanks to my lovely wife, Laura Geyer, who put me in this position. She goes, I just want you to write. That's it. So yeah, it's the Substack, yeah, that's pretty much what I'm doing right now. Cool. I'm just sort of chilling and illing and killing. That's basically what I'm doing.
Good for you.
Well, Dennis, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. As always,
thanks, man.
It's so much fun to talk to you. This was great.
I always love coming on with you guys. You know that I'm around anytime.
We appreciate it. We mentioned it in one of our wrap-up shows. You've been a friend for a long time, since the beginning of season 2, and we appreciate it. And you've always been there for us. It means a lot. So thank you so much for always coming and hanging out and talking.
No problem, man. I love you guys. So yeah, thanks for having me on. I always appreciate it too.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. Thanks for listening to the Not Ready for Primetime Project. Look for us on social media everywhere at NR4PT Project. And please drop us a line to let us know what you think of the shows, and frankly, because we're kind of lonely, at nr4ptproject@gmail.com. The Not Ready for Primetime Project team includes Brad Robinson and Gary Seath. Our announcer is Jason Taylor, who is not doing his job announcing these end credits. And the original music by Jacob Spiewak. Please remember to rate and review wherever you watch and or listen to the show. Thanks for listening. Good night, and have a pleasant tomorrow.
Brad, why do you do this? Do you do this to hurt us?
Did I ever show you my Fridays jacket? I'm sure I did.
I thought you had one, yes. When I was thinking, I feel like Dennis showed us he had a jacket.
Yeah.
They gave out these jackets to everybody on the show. So
right.
no matter where you worked.
Okay.
If you're a part of the Fridays broadcast, you got a jacket. Okay. And my wife bought this for me years ago. It was a Christmas present, and I can't wear it. It's far too small for me, but I tried wearing it once in public, and I looked like the Incredible Hulk breaking out of his shirt. It was ridiculous.